a frequent media commentator, speaker. You see her often on Newsmax and Fox News and other national cable news networks speaking in support of education freedom. A seasoned business executive, she has offered her expertise to help further the expansion of high-quality freedom options and improve accountability and governance in American schools. She was a former elected member of the Collier County School Board and previously sat on Florida's Constitution and Revision Commission and Governor DeSantis' Advisory Committee on Education and Workforce Development. She also served on the Florida Gulf Coast University Board of Trustees. She spent 20 years in the financial services industries, and she was Chief Financial Officer and Chief Compliance Officer and Managing Partner at a multi-million-dollar investment management firm responsible for finance, compliance, and operations. Erika and her husband, Congressman Byron Donalds, have lived in Naples since 2002, and they have 3 sons, Damon, Darren, and Mason. Welcome, Erika, and we appreciate you for being here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be here, and especially in the state of Mississippi, and I appreciate everyone that's here interested in the cause of education freedom, which is what I've dedicated my life to for the past 15 years. And I'm here not just as an education expert or someone who's served on school boards and university committees and Constitution Revision Commissions. I mean, those are all great titles, but the only reason I'm doing that is because I am first and foremost a mom, as mentioned, a mom of 3 boys who astonishingly are 22, 18, and 14 now. But like many of you, as a parent, I grew up in a single family home, grew up out of poverty. Education was my ticket out into the great success that I've been blessed to have in my career. And I wanted more and better for my kids than what I had growing up. And like most middle class families, I did what probably many of you did, which is to pick a house in a community where the schools were good. And the state told me they were A schools. And as a CPA, as an accountant, I didn't know anything about education. So if they tell me it's an A school, that's where I want to build my home. That's where I want to grow my family. And one boy goes off to the school, he does great. Second boy goes off to the school, and it's a disaster. And I'm like, wait a second, what's the problem? Well, the teacher didn't have very many good answers. We met many, many times. The counselor didn't have good answers. The assistant principal didn't have good answers. Ultimately, they concluded that if I didn't put my son on medication, that he was going to have to get on a bus every day and be bused across town to a special classroom. Well, that wasn't acceptable to me. I wasn't seeing any issues at home, and he was learning just fine when I was with him. So I immediately pulled him out of that school. I discovered there were other types of schools. I didn't even know that. I didn't know there was classical education and STEM education, but I found out. I fell in love with classical education, found a small classical private school, put the tuition on my credit card, true story. I joked that I had to pick my favorite child to go to private school because I could only afford one at the time. But I will tell you, this child was in the middle of 1st grade. When he was in the public school, he cried every day. He hated going to school. And as a mom, that meant I was miserable because I was failing as a mother. The first day that he went to that classical private school, I picked him up because now I had to rearrange my work schedule, as did my husband, to take him and pick him up. He jumped in the car with the biggest smile on his face. And he was like, "Mom, did you know about the Crusades?" Well, I didn't get a great education growing up, so I didn't know about the Crusades, but he was going to tell me about it. And every day after that, this child talked all the way home about all the things that he was learning, how excited he was to be in that school, and he loved learning. I still get chills every time I tell the story. From then on, he never was in a special classroom aside from being in AP and honors classes. He graduated actually earlier this year from high school and got a full ride, is now playing college basketball on his way to be an attorney. And that is what got me into this, because I thought, how many other Darrens are out there? How many other parents are listening to the experts when they know better? And there may be another option out there for their child, but unlike me, they probably can't afford it. And they may not be able to rearrange their schedule to get them there and get them home. Or like my community, there's no charter schools, only private schools, most of which were unaffordable to me. And so I started on a journey to help bring options to families, which I thought was sort of a small problem when I first started. But when I opened my first charter school in my community, we had 400 spots, all 400 were filled, and we had 400 more on a waiting list. Well, then that meant that the problem was much bigger than what I had anticipated. So we opened that charter school, and then I ran for school board against a longtime incumbent. I started attending school board meetings, and I saw that the school board members were not responsive to parents. On one particular issue, we brought 100 parents into a school board meeting simply to ask them not to change our after-school care program. We liked what we had. They treated us with such contempt that we would come to try to give them feedback when they're the experts. And even though 100 families, 100 parents came and said, please don't change it, please don't change it, please don't change it, in the end, those school board members said, you're upset now, but you're gonna go away and we're gonna still be here. And of course, they did whatever they wanted. I walked up to the dais and I said to my representative, the school board member, you're supposed to represent me. As a voter, I vote for you. And she looked me dead in the face and said, I don't represent you. I represent the district. I ran against her. She didn't even make it through the election. She dropped out, and I won that election and served 4 years on that school board. But unfortunately, what I thought was my ability to change things within the system, because who wouldn't want to improve it and be responsive to parents, I ran into the brick wall that I ran into as a parent, as someone starting a charter school in my community, and then as a school board member. The system is so ingrained and so unresponsive to parents that I concluded it's not going to be changed from the inside, at least not in the emergency situation that I knew a lot of parents were in. Because then, of course, as a school board member, I'm hearing from parents all the time about the issues with their local public schools. And the most heartbreaking ones, they wanted their child to go to another school that they thought would serve their child better, and the only way to do that was to lie about their address. Of course, as a school board member, I'm like, oh, don't tell me that. But those were heartbreaking conversations. Parents of students with special needs who had literally no other option, but the particular public school that they were assigned to was just simply not doing what they expected that their child would be able to do. I remember one in particular, their child couldn't read. The child was all the way in the 5th grade in a special needs classroom in this particular school, which was the best special needs classroom in the district. And she just was fighting with them constantly, and they were like, he's not gonna read. He's special needs, he has a disability, he's not gonna read. She finally pulled him out, rearranged her life so that she could homeschool him, and he was reading within 6 months of being at home. And you could say perhaps these are one-off stories, but now I've been in this for 15 years. I have opened 6 charter schools, a virtual school, in fact, the world's first virtual reality school. My co-founder lives here in Hattiesburg, that is operating both as a charter and as a private school in 17 states. And we talk to a lot of parents. Because we are a school choice option, those parents are coming to us going, here's why I needed this choice. Thank you so much for offering this option. My child is thriving because XYZ. These stories are not unique. But what is unique now, and certainly here in Mississippi, is these families' ability to make those choices. One of my teachers that lives here in Mississippi came up and visited me in Washington, D.C. with her daughter, who's in our online school. The teacher, the mom, testified about how great it was that she had this option to teach online and how much she loved it and how it was really changing the lives of her students. And then her daughter testified about how great it was for her. She's a middle schooler, she wasn't fitting in, she wasn't comfortable in school, and now she's thriving academically, she has all these amazing interests in the school. But the only reason that she's able to go to that school is because we allow the children of our teachers to attend tuition free. So we're giving them school choice, but they wouldn't otherwise have that here in Mississippi. And that's one of your own constituents. At its core, school choice, education freedom, it is the civil rights issue of our time. Every single parent has the right to direct the upbringing of their child, whether that be education, their health, or their values. And more importantly now than ever, parents have to know that if they are sending their child into the hands of someone for 7 or 8 hours a day, many times the teachers, the administrators, the people in that school are spending more time with those children than their very own parents. And those schools do not align with the values that those parents want to teach at home. That is not freedom. That is not liberty, and that is un-American.
Okay, I've got to stop everybody. I know some of you are here and were not here earlier this morning, but I admonished the room. We're not engaging in clapping, shouting, or interrupting the speakers, so we can get through with this, okay? So no more clapping from the audience, please.
We do not allow monopolies in America for very good reason. They stifle competition, they limit innovation, and they are unresponsive to the consumers that they are supposed to serve. We have the benefit of so much innovation and technology and great service everywhere we look in America, except for one major industry, and that is education. Think about what innovative schools do you have here in Mississippi that you'd like me to tour? Do you have any great STEM schools, any schools that are serving industries, growing industries in your communities? Classical schools, private schools, Catholic schools. I'm sure you have lots of different schools. Any that are particularly innovative. Sometimes we're very proud of having a little bit of choice. I know that less than 1% of your students attend charter schools, for example. It just doesn't seem like a lot of variety for the families that I know are very diverse in this state. And the students who I know very well are diverse in their needs, their interests, and the things that they want to accomplish as human beings. Most importantly, parents want options. This has, especially since COVID, become a 70-30 in the case of some Democrats, 75-25 in the case of independents, and 80-20 in the case of Republicans issue. That means 70 to 80% of your parents, and I'm not talking about nationwide, I'm talking about Ed Choice, shout out to Ed Choice that I know is represented here, polling in Mississippi specifically, where 72% overall of school parents want and support school choice. And not only do they support school choice, but more than half of them, in fact, 73% school parents believe that that school choice should be available regardless of income or special needs. So anyone who's considering these, maybe tiny programs or limitations, that's not what your parents want. And I've watched this happen. I've been involved in a lot of different states in these advocacy efforts on behalf of parents, on behalf of families and children. And this will happen eventually when the people want it. Another important statistic that I want to bring up, again in the same Ed Choice poll, specifically Mississippi, is that when asked, 57% of school parents said that they would send their children to a school outside of the district school if they had the option. And I know one of the criticisms of a potential school choice program is that this may take money away from the public schools. Well, maybe that's why. But who wins here? Do the superintendents and the teachers associations, do they win? Do they get to say where these children go to school, how these children are taught? Or do the 57% of parents who say, I want something else, because obviously those parents, they're not doing that out of convenience. If they would choose something else, it's not because it's more convenient for them. I'm sure you guys have busing, you have all the things that make it very convenient to go to the local public school. They're saying that because they think, for whatever reason it is, maybe they want their child to receive religious education during the day. Maybe they want that additional enforcement. Maybe their child's getting bullied. Whatever the reason is, who knows what is best for that child? We need to put these decisions in the hands of the parents who know their children best and love them the most. This is a movement that will not be stopped. I hope that this wonderful effort that many of your leaders are putting forth here today, I know your governor, your speaker, your chairman here is very supportive of these efforts and trying to get something accomplished to give the maximum amount of flexibility to parents who want options. There are a lot of criticisms, there are a lot of concerns, but if we do not allow parents to become consumers. If we do not put those decisions in the hands of parents, then you will not receive the benefit of additional options coming to your state. You might say, well, there aren't very many private schools. Well, that may be true, but that's because you don't have a consumer base. When you get a consumer base, like we've seen in other states, that's when you have micro schools pop up. You have hybrid schools pop up. You have homeschool co-ops pop up. You have other private schools of different types pop up. Charter schools, if you have a law that's a little friendlier to the growth of charter schools, you would have more of them pop up. I'll tell you, 17 other states have passed universal choice laws, ESAs specifically, over the past 3 years. And if I'm an education entrepreneur, of course, which I am, wanting to start a great new type of school that I know is gonna really serve students well. I just visited this incredible AI-driven school in Texas, the Alpha School, that's just blowing everyone away in their scores. Are they gonna look at Mississippi and go, we should go there? We should go serve students in Mississippi with this incredible new program? Probably not, right? You're not welcoming that innovation, even if you have parents that really want it. So the bottom line is that, the reason that I'm here, the reason I advocate for this around the country is I'm here because these children only get one chance at kindergarten, one chance at first grade, one chance at second grade. And I know how it feels to be a parent that has that feeling of failure, that I am not giving my child every day the very best opportunity to succeed academically and therefore achieve the American dream long term. Put these decisions in the hands of parents, give them the education freedom that they deserve, and watch your economy of education in Mississippi flourish, and long term, the economy of your entire state flourish. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Dawkins. I will open the floor to questions from my colleagues, and I have a few myself with me. So, any members of the committee wish to ask Ms. Dawkins a question? Okay. Representative Rosewood, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Dawkins, I heard you make a statement earlier about a monopoly. Can you express to me why you think that public education would be considered a monopoly?
Absolutely. What is a monopoly? It's an organization, whether that in an industry, that is dominating the marketplace, that inhibits any competition and limits consumer choice. Would you say that a public education is a monopoly, sir?
Actually, I would.
Does it dominate the marketplace? In Mississippi, I think it's got over 90%.
Well, I would say it doesn't. It's not categorized as a monopoly to me because there are various types of schools that already exist. So the monopoly would only exist if that was the only structure. So it deletes that period in my mind.
We could agree to disagree on that. Does it inhibit those options from flourishing?
Well, currently there are individuals that have choices, and they've made those choices. As stated earlier and on and on. We do have ESA programs, we have other programs that exist throughout the state. We have a private school sector as well. So I still would say, regardless of the points that you make on it, I still would say that public education is not monopolizing the education sector in the state. And that's my point.
In general, I would say the people who have school choice are the wealthier individuals, right? People who can spend the money on private education. They have options.
I would have to agree to disagree with that as well.
Okay, I have 3 kids and I've been middle class for a while. Even at my best, I probably could afford 2 of them to go to private school. If you have 3 kids and you're a middle to low income family, can you afford the private schools in this state?
No, it really makes it difficult, and that's one of the problems that a lot of individuals throughout the state have with the different programs that you're addressing. But primarily, my question was on the monopoly of it, and it's just the definition of monopoly does not define what the public education sector is to me in this state.
Thank you for your question.
Harrison, Representative Belcher, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you read the phraseology of the poll that you cited with the 70, 70, and 80%?
Absolutely. All right, it's a little bit long. An education savings account in K-12 education, often called an ESA, establishes for parents a government-authorized savings account with restricted but multiple uses for educational purposes. Parents can then use these funds to pay for school tuition, tutoring, online education programs, therapies for students with special needs, textbooks or other instructional materials, or save for future college expenses. Total support, strongly support plus somewhat support, school parents, 72% of that statement.
Very well, thank you. And what have you seen in your experience when school choice is implemented at, a substantial level of the schools that are failing and the kids that are at that failing school, knowing only a portion of those kids, for whatever reason, will be able to take advantage of that? What has happened to the failing schools and the kids at those failing schools?
Well, there are a few outcomes when parents have options. The first one, ideally, you have some schools pop up that will help to meet the needs of that community, or schools that exist already, perhaps parochial schools, private schools that are able to expand, and parents are able to access those existing schools in those communities. And what you would like to see is that gives rise to some additional effort on the part of the public school to improve their performance. And I have seen that happen. In fact, that happened in my own district back home, where a charter school opened and a school that was a C, D, or F every year magically got a new principal and has been an A or B ever since. So that is an ideal situation when you get competition and it improves everyone. Alternatively, we've also seen where parents have other options, they exercise those options. You see the public school enrollment go down to a level where it's not sustainable to continue to operate that school. Most of the time, that school continues to operate and be subsidized, even though parents don't want their children to go there. I personally think that schools that parents don't want should close. That is a free market principle that I think will work well in education. And then the last option, I believe, is that they do close, right? That parents have other options. You have other schools that are flourishing in the community, and this public school system consolidates, perhaps brings the remaining kids into a school that's performing better in order to keep them in the public school system, and decides what to do with those facilities.
That's interesting. So the school would close in some cities in Mississippi. The school may be the largest employer of citizens there. So if it did close, that would be quite impactful. I guess that would be incentive to protect your job as much as you were looking out for the education of kids. I think, to your point, we certainly need to put the kids first and foremost.
Well, that's the question. Do the kids exist to employ the adults?
Exactly my point. We need to put the kids first.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll recognize the lady Erika, Representative First.
Okay, you mentioned, if we were a state that was a little friendlier for charter schools, what exactly would that look like? If we were to sharpen that up and shake that up a little bit, what would you recommend in that regard?
I won't get into too much of your politics, but I think your leadership, and I mean, if I had my preference, every legislative leader, governor, lieutenant governor, Senate leadership, we should all be here for the best of kids. We don't have a future if we do not allow these kids to thrive in the best manner possible. And in fact, we're just talking about Mississippi perhaps versus the rest of the country. We need to be thinking about Mississippi as part of the United States compared to the rest of the world, because we are behind. And I would want all manner of innovative, high quality options to come to my state. And if your charter school laws are only producing less than 1% of your students being in charter schools, they're obviously not friendly. There are tons of charter school operators around this country that would love to serve kids in Mississippi. They love to come into low-income districts, areas where there's a real need, and we know there are areas of real need here. Why aren't they coming here? You have the evidence that you don't have a friendly charter school system because you don't have Success Academy beating down your door, Idea Academies beating, all these high-performing charter school networks. The better question to ask is, how can we attract them here so that they can serve our students in our communities and increase our academic performance?
Okay. Gentleman from DeSoto, Representative Eubanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What are the laws like in Florida, or at least the standards? Because we hear a lot about accountability, and I talked with a lady who was big in the school choice movement up in Illinois, and then of course, I guess the Democrats took over and cranked it back. And she said that one of the problems that they had with all the accountability standards was the kids that were receiving that benefit, it was kind of like they were singled out because they had to go take the test, you know. But what kind of testing does Florida require for students that are receiving ESAs?
Yeah, and I'll start by saying I'm a big believer in accountability. Governor Jeb Bush, that brought in our A through F grading system, brought in annual state required tests, did an incredible service to our state. We've gained so much from that visibility into how the schools are doing. For our scholarship programs, you do have to take a national norm reference standardized test that's reported then to the Department of Education. Now that we have a more scaled scholarship program, it's not so much of a singled out situation. When our program was very small, you might only have 1 or 2 or 3 kids in a particular school that's taking it. Now we have entire schools and beyond that are created for the purpose of the scholarship. So I think it's become the norm more to have that annual standardized test, but there's a list of tests from which to choose from. They don't have to take the state test, which I think is good because it gives the schools of choice an option of a test that's going to work best with their curriculum.
Well, how does that look though if a student who is receiving scholarship takes the test and fails it? Do they cease to receive the scholarship? Or are they only held to the standard of whatever school they would have gone to, and as long as they at least score the average of that school, they're in the clear? What does that mechanism look like?
It's not if this student fails, they don't get the scholarship anymore. There is a required reporting to the parents and a required visibility on an overall basis for the school that parents need to be aware of. But the ultimate accountability is giving parents information that they need and agency to make decisions for their children. So you mentioned where they came from. Now, let's just say hypothetically, where they came from was an F school and they were 2-3 grade levels behind, and where they are now in a private school is an F, would be an F school if they were all taking the test and they're 2-3 grade levels behind. Let's say they're the same, but the parent is choosing this private school. Is it up to the state to say, no, parent, you shouldn't send your child there, you're going to send them back over here? What if it is because the child's behavior has turned around completely? What if it is because they're much safer in that private school? This is where I feel like our movement has really gotten away from that it has to be completely academically driven, although I'm very big believer in that we have to improve those academics across the board, and I think school choice does that. But parents now are making decisions, number 1, for safety, and number 2, for values, ahead of academics across the country. And so that is where it can't just be about that, although I believe in these accountability mechanisms, mostly for accountability through transparency and empowering parents with the information they need to make informed decisions and for the market to work.
Okay, thank you.
Lady from Hines.
Thank you, Jim. You stated earlier that you were able to rearrange your work schedule and drive your child to private school, right?
Ma'am, yes.
So what's it like if they're, and I'm just asking a question, if they're a parent that may have 2 or 3 jobs, and what suggestions do you have for those parents who may want to, but can't get their child there?
Yeah, it's a tremendously difficult situation. In Florida, we do have transportation scholarships along with our scholarship program. It's also one of the allowable expenses in our ESA program is transportation dollars. That is difficult. What are you pay for a bus pass? You pay for an Uber? Or what are you paying for with these transportation dollars? Or sharing that workload, if you will, with other parents is one option. But I talk about schools on the moon, right? It doesn't help us to have amazing schools on the moon because we can't get the kids there. I'm not familiar enough with your transportation laws here, but it is a major impediment for families not to have transportation to schools of choice. And I think if you are, as you are looking at doing a school choice program, you absolutely have to take into consideration how to help families with transportation, whether that means it's an allowable expense. There's some shared responsibility with districts for those economies of scale or some other manner in which that can be accomplished. One other idea is that schools of choice receive the same capital funding that district schools do. That's one issue that I would say we have in Florida and with many charter school programs is that we want to bus the kids, but we don't get the busing funds that the traditional public schools do. So I think this is another market issue as well, that if you fund the school choice program appropriately, if the traditional schools can afford to do transportation, so can the choice schools, and they will be competing on that as well.
Any other members? Want to engage in questions? Gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your presentation, very enlightening. Can you tell me a little bit about the academic success of these ESAs, the academic achievement?
Sure. Well, I'll start with charter schools because they're the longest established schools of choice where you have a longer track record of established schools. So in Florida, for example, where you have 10% of the students attending charter schools, in almost all, maybe I think one grade level, one subject area, where the charter schools are outperforming the comparable traditional public schools, every grade level, every subject area, and every demographic, closing the achievement gap. So across the board, the charter school sector is outperforming the public school sector. And the reason why I use that is because the charter school sector is 25 years old. That statistic would not be the case if you were talking about 2002, when it was only 5 years old, like ESA programs are, less than 3 years old. As someone who has started multiple charter schools, and I'm not sure if you've started any businesses, those first few years, getting new customers, getting your product out there, figuring out the kinks, is not the time to measure the success of that business, school, program, etc. What I would measure it by is how much these programs are growing. For example, in Florida, you had 125,000 when we first went universal. Last year you had 500,000. This year we're looking at 750,000 in the program. So what does that tell you, right? That's a measure of success, is how much demand there is. The other measure I would say is every one of our private schools, our charter schools, they all have waiting lists. We can't get enough schools open to meet the demand for the parents that want these options. And so the program itself is what has the returns right now. In terms of the academic performance of this, a lot of the initial expansion related to ESAs are of existing private schools, right? Because they already have an infrastructure, so they can add a building or they can add a grade level because now more people have access. And so those private schools, they've already had to weather the market conditions to survive, right? They're already outperforming and they're already attracting a constituency. So it's almost, I could tell you they're outperforming the traditional public schools, but of course they are. They've been around a long time. They're just adding seats. That's what you're gonna see when you put a program in place initially. You're gonna see more space in the private schools that are already performing well for students. Then you have the fledgling economy that I was talking about. Micro schools, right? Hybrid schools, new private schools that are gonna take a few years to get up and running and really be able to show us what they can do in terms of performance.
Any questions? Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you for being here today. One of the questions that I have heard, and I'll be very honest with you, I've thought about this and tried to roll my own answer around it, and I really haven't come up with a solid one quite yet, but there's some good schools out there, some very good schools out there, and one of the points being pushed back on the issue of school choice has been that, is this going to hurt our good schools? Now, there's a part of me that says that good schools are going to be good schools and they're going to get bigger, they're going to bring more students in. I think that's my knee-jerk answer to this. However, what would you say to the members on this committee or House members, or for that matter, parents in general, that are genuinely concerned about that A school district or that B school district? And this is a change. The system arguably needs to have some shakeup and change. However, I do get that they're concerned about their own school district. They're concerned about their the possibility of it being harmed in some way, shape, or form. Is that a situation that you've seen in other states? Have those schools become stronger? Have they become weaker? What have you seen out there?
Well, and it is a valid concern. I know people take a lot of pride in their schools, their school districts, their neighborhoods. And the people, of course, the superintendents, the teachers, all very proud of the work they've done, especially if they're in a high-performing district that is very desirable for a lot of people. What we have seen is that those school districts, especially those that have resources, they do beef up. Even though they're already high performing, they know that they have to compete and they have the resources to compete. And so they aren't usually the ones that are most hurt. Now, sure, there still will be students in those high performing districts that make this choice. If you have open enrollment, that's an open spot in a high performing district for a child who needs a choice and wants a public school option. So you could look at it that way, that the student who's leaving that high performing district gets the choice that they feel that their parents feel that they need, and another student who's maybe coming from another public school district that has open enrollment choice gets to take that spot and be in a better situation themselves. So it's a win-win in that circumstance. Most early school choice programs do not touch local tax dollars. And that's what you're using to maintain your facilities, for your capital and things like that. So the only dollars that would be leaving are the ones that are used for the operational expenses of having those additional students. So in theory, I understand economies of scale, but in theory, especially in the early years of a school choice program, as it gradually comes up, you don't have a huge hit to these school districts, especially if they are high performing. A, because you're likely to replace that spot if you also offer open enrollment as part of your school choice program, and B, because you have fewer of them leaving, that you won't have that capital issue that is really going to harm a high performing district.
Thank you for that answer. You said something earlier when you said that this issue is the civil rights issue of our time. I frankly agree with you. One of the reasons that I'm passionate about this is I do think that we have schools out there that were created for the wrong reasons. Completely think they were created for the wrong reasons. We do have a school choice program in the state currently, and it is called the rich people get to go where they want to, and the poor people can take what they get. I genuinely have a problem with that. I'd like to see us be able to get to a position where our poor children have the same ability to go to a school that meets their needs. What would you say to the parents that are nervous about because some of the pushback that I've even heard was that this is, the intent of this is to harm our public schools for the benefit of private schools, and to benefit these private schools that were created, some of them rightfully, being told rightfully so, that these were created for the wrong reason. What would you say to these people? Do we need to have this conversation? And I think now is as good a time as any to be discussing how we make certain that our children are treated fairly across the board, black, white, pink, or purple. I don't care. I just want our children to be treated fairly. Is that something that you've seen in other states, or is this just something that's happening here in Mississippi?
This happens all over the country. And I think what we would all say that we want is we want every child to have the same opportunity to succeed. But if you go to one school in one neighborhood, another school in another neighborhood. They're both public schools. Any one of us, if we're honest, would say, this child is not getting the same opportunity to succeed as this child over here. Even private schools in different communities are not the same opportunity to succeed. A program that gives every single child the same amount to take where they would want to go is not the end, it is the beginning of the process of equal opportunity. And here's why. Because to your point, the wealthy can choose the school that they want, either by buying a home at a premium where they want their children to go to a public school, or by paying private school, usually at a premium to what even you would get in a scholarship program like this. So even if you start the scholarship program and you give $7,000, $8,000, whatever it is, to every single child, that's still not going to equal the opportunity across those schools, because you might not have private schools that are affordable at that level. But what you will see happen, and this is why it's so important to do this now, is the new operators that come in are going to come in and say, I'm going to open a private school that's under the scholarship amount. Why? Because I want the maximum number of parents to be able to access my private school so that I can max out my enrollment. If you're starting a new business, you start a new business at the level of affordability for the maximum number of consumers. So when you do that, you'll start to see more options at the level of the scholarship, as opposed to what you probably have now, which are private schools that are outside of affordability, both for anyone who might be receiving partial scholarship and for, of course, if you're not on a school choice program right now. So that is where you have to start somewhere to get the market going. And the maximum number of consumers, that's why universal is so important, is how you bring those entrepreneurs and innovative programs and things into the marketplace that are then going to bring the price down to thereabouts the scholarship amount. I also work very closely, founded a foundation called the Education Freedom Foundation, and we help founders bring new school opportunities to schools to states that have ESAs. And to a man, every one of those founders that are coming there for help want to open a school that is at the scholarship amount in their particular state.
Any other questions? Or it's my turn? Okay. Thank you, Erika. I have a couple of questions. We had a question earlier, I believe it was actually asked of both of our other speakers, about who is pushing these policies or what is motivating this recent push. And there was one particular answer that kind of disturbed me. And it says, basically because there's a concerted effort to defund public schools, that it's become a cash cow for these people who support the program. What do you see as the motivation behind the recent push for education freedom, not just in Mississippi, but throughout the country?
I work with a lot of people in this space, advocacy groups, charter school operators, private school founders, innovators who have, great technology that they're bringing into the space. I really can't name one that's in it for the money. I think there are a lot of great ways to make money in this country. Being in education policy or running schools or opening schools is a very difficult way to do that. Even if they do make money, which I think as capitalism is one in America where you have the opportunity to provide value and make money doing it. But it's not about making money. All of these people are passionate about not just helping children and helping them succeed and have the best opportunities for them, but many of them also care about their state and their state succeeding and having the talent pipeline to grow an economy and thrive as a state and the country. And like I said earlier, we as a country have to do better. We are so far behind in the innovation of this sector, and we've got to all pull together. Florida, Mississippi, Arizona, Oklahoma, we've all got to do it. We've all got to do our best for our kids. And so I don't see that at all. That doesn't mean people don't make money in education, but let me tell you, I was in a Wall Street firm for 20 years as a partner. If I wanted to make the maximum amount of money, I could have stayed there and saved myself a lot of Twitter hate. But no. The other thing is the wealthy families that a lot of people say, oh, this is a pay for the wealthy families. There are a lot of wealthy families that are saying, no, you don't have to do school choice. They don't care. They're paying for their kids' school choice. They're not the ones beating down our doors for school choice. It's the many times middle income families, those gap families, where they can't get a scholarship from a parochial school or one of the low income programs because they make too much, but they make too little to afford private school. And so they're stuck in the middle, stuck in the gap.
We talked about accountability earlier, and what would you consider true accountability?
Parents' ability to vote with their feet.
And explain that, I like that.
Well, first of all, they need to have agency in order to make decisions. And agency includes both the funding that a school choice program like the one you're considering would provide. It includes transportation, like the representative brought up, and the ability to get their child to the school of their choice. But it also includes information. And I believe in accountability through transparency. And so as you're considering a program, certainly making sure that academic scores are shared, whether that's on the individual child on a school-wide basis, very important. Safety information is shared on a transparent basis, what kind of incidents they're having at their school, to let parents know about that. Perhaps even things like tenure, teacher quality. Whatever parents need in order to have the information they need, what curriculum is being used, what values are being taught. Eventually, as school choice continues to proliferate, I envision that we will have the Yelps of schools. I mean, we've got some niche and great schools are two private options that parents depend on more than they depend on any state rankings. Study just out of Heritage just showed that parents really depend on those much more than they do the things that come out of the state. But parents having those types of reviews and transparency of information so that if they do have choice, especially state-funded choice, that they're getting the information they need that in order to make an informed decision.
So you mentioned accountability through transparency. Currently, we do have our accountability metric in Mississippi where we grade our scores A through F. If you're a DNF district for a period of a certain amount of years, the state will ultimately take you over, attempt to get you back on your feet, give you back to the locals. That's a process that takes a period of several years. But if you're a C, D, and going back and forth, even right now, the parent is not allowed to leave a public school and go to another public school without that sending district approving it. Is that true accountability through transparency?
Yeah, no, that is not accountability at all. The schools, again, the children only get one chance, especially when you're talking about kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, those formational years that, did you say it takes 7 years of a process?
No, it's several years.
Several,
I think
well.
it happens to be 3 years in a row.
I mean, that could be an entire middle school career for a child that those schools are not serving well. I know it's easy when you're here and you're talking about those children, but if it's your child, I would be hard pressed. I've been in a lot of legislative meetings. I have not met a legislator whose child is going to a school they don't want them to go to. Most of you, if you're elected or you're in this room, your children are going to a school you want them to go to. And you're making decisions for other people who don't have that option.
You mentioned Florida, and you mentioned the fact that there's been a new market opened up in Florida, and I believe Mr. Boudreaux earlier mentioned that he spoke to a Florida superintendent who said in his own district, the number of private schools increased from 11 to 21. Can you explain the competitive environment you're seeing in Florida now between not only public and private, but also public and public schools? And I'll tell you an example someone mentioned is, maybe it's Broward County Schools putting up billboards, trying to recruit parents to come there, things like that. Can you explain what you're seeing as far as in the market and the competitiveness?
Yeah, I think it's something to celebrate when you double the number of private schools that are available or in your community. That means they're competing even more, not just with the public schools, but with one another to offer the most innovative programs that are serving the needs of individual students. I think it's incredible when we see innovative options like the Alpha School that is coming to Florida and expanding there, that's using AI and using project-based learning and life skills. Other STEM schools, I visited a school that was all about gardening and agriculture. These are great options, and public schools are now coming up with innovative options themselves of a magnet nature, right? This high school is going to have an engineering program. We're going to put all this into it. CTEs in the high schools has become a big competitive feature, making sure that the students are able to go right into a career after school. I think all of those things are a result of those competitive pressures. I don't like to see necessarily, unless they're advertising new innovative programs that they're using to bring in new students, that the school districts are spending literally tens of millions of dollars on marketing instead of on improving their academic programs. That's not what we like to see, but listen, they're trying to keep from losing students. I don't think that that's the way to do it, because parents, I see them on, I'm sure all of you do, on Facebook, on the moms groups. They're talking about what schools are doing well, what programs are exciting to them. They're looking at hybrid schools and other innovative options. In fact, this same survey said that in Mississippi, half of your parents said they would want their child home with them at least one day a week. So when you talk about hybrid programs, that's the most popular, fastest growing type of program across the country when it comes to school choice. Those are the type of things that we should be competing on.
Thank you. You said a lot of words. You started with the freedom of liberty, and then you mentioned things like competition and the free market. These are words that sound very familiar to me because it's in my party platform. I ran as a Republican in a primary, and I won a Republican primary. Can you explain, and I know you were also a Republican and a conservative, and President Trump is pushing these policies across the state in his administration. Can you explain your position, how you believe it aligns with yourself as a conservative, and then any information you may provide this committee as to the importance this issue is to the leaders of our country?
Yeah, and school choice has been part of the Republican Party platform since 1996. So it has been a long time coming where meaningful school choice has actually come out to fruition in a lot of states. Florida got its first charter school in 1998, so we're ahead of the game. But one of the major factors in the explosion of school choice has been since COVID, and when parents really decided that they want options. And we see that in a hockey stick effect in the polling numbers from parents. And it doesn't matter. I mentioned 72, that's across the board. I said in the beginning, this is a Democrat independent thing as well. But the president, as you mentioned, President Trump has started to get involved in state issues when it comes to school choice, because when he got elected, he said, I'm getting rid of the federal Department of Education. We're putting education back down to the states where your local leadership can be held accountable for the outcomes that are happening in your districts. And he wants to see states put the power in the hands of the parents to make decisions for their children. He got involved in Tennessee and in Texas, where we just had two big programs passed. In Texas, $1 billion, the very largest day one program in history passed for school choice as an ESA. And the president is getting involved because he is very passionate about school choice, and not just in general, but universal education savings accounts. That's what he is pushing. What's unfortunate, and I just have to mention this in the same breath, there was a time when Democrats supported school choice as well. There was an organization which President Obama was part of, Democrats for Education Reform. And it's so mind-blowing that any party, that this even has to be put forth as a partisan issue. It is not a partisan issue. It's only a partisan issue because of the political machinations that people are doing around it and the money flowing. This is about children getting the opportunity to succeed that they need. It is about bringing innovation into our education system and free market pressures that increase quality and access for everyone. Anyone who is against giving parents those options has some ulterior motive, is protecting something else besides the best interest of children, in my opinion. And so, yes, absolutely, President Trump has said he will get involved in additional states. I was with him a week after he was inaugurated in the White House at a school choice roundtable. It was a small group of us and several governors there. He said, any state that needs my help to get school choice across the finish line, I will help you. And he has made good on that.
Any other questions, any additional questions for members before we move on to our next speaker? Perfect, thank you, Erica, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It was an honor truly.
We have Dr. Wolf up next. We can